He didn't send an invitation. He sent a warning. In the fall of 1931, a man named Salvatore Maranzano called a meeting. Not a negotiation, not a peace summit, a declaration. He had just won the bloodiest gang war New York had ever seen, and now he intended to collect his prize. He would be the boss of all bosses. He would sit at the top. Everyone else would kneel. He was dead within 5 months. And the men who killed him didn't replace him with another king. They did something far more dangerous, far more intelligent, and far more lasting. They built a system. They drew lines on a map. They divided the most powerful city in the world into 5 kingdoms and agreed, in writing, in blood, in silence, never to cross those lines again. The 5 families of New York weren't born in violence. They were born in a boardroom, and that is what made them impossible to destroy. Before we go further, if you're new here, hit subscribe.
This channel is where organized crime gets the investigation it deserves. The year is 1930. New York City is a machine running on illegal fuel. Prohibition has been the law of the land for a decade, and the men who ignored that law have become extraordinarily, obscenely rich. Bootleg liquor flows through every borough. Speakeasies outnumber churches. The police are underpaid and frequently for sale. Politicians look the other way because looking the other way pays better than looking straight ahead. But beneath the prosperity, something is rotting. The Italian criminal underworld in America is tearing itself apart. On one side stands Joe Masseria, known as Joe the Boss, a squat and brutal man who clawed his way to power through sheer ferocity and survived more assassination attempts than seemed statistically possible. On the other side stands Salvatore Maranzano, a Sicilian nobleman who quoted Julius Caesar, collected Roman history books, and believed deeply that the old world structure of power, one supreme commander above all others, was the only model that made sense. Between these 2 men, a war erupts. It is called the Castellamarese War, named for the Sicilian town that produced many of Maranzano's men. It lasts nearly 2 years. Men die in restaurants, in barber shops, on street corners, in their own beds. The city holds its breath. Masseria dies first. He is shot in a Coney Island restaurant in April of 1931 while playing cards. The 4 men who pulled the triggers include a young, ambitious gangster named Charles Luciano, who had been Masseria's own lieutenant. Luciano had already switched sides. Maranzano wins the war. He holds a massive gathering of Italian crime figures at a Bronx ballroom, declares himself Capo di tutti capi, boss of all bosses, and establishes a structure loosely modeled on the Roman legions he so admired. Beneath him, bosses, underbosses, captains, soldiers. Clean, hierarchical, organized. And then Maranzano makes the mistake that every man who reaches the top eventually makes. He starts planning to eliminate the people he fears. Luciano is on the list. So are a dozen others. Luciano moves faster. On September 10, 1931, 4 men posing as IRS agents walk into Maranzano's Park Avenue office. They kill him with knives and gunfire. Within hours across the country, dozens of Maranzano loyalists are dead. It is later called the Night of the Sicilian Vespers, though historians debate how coordinated it truly was. What is not debated is the result. The era of the single supreme boss is over. It will never return. What Luciano builds in its place is something entirely new, something American. He doesn't take Maranzano's throne.
Instead, he calls together the most powerful Italian-American crime figures in New York and proposes a structure that has no throne at all. 5 separate families, each controlling its own territory, each led by its own boss, each sovereign within its borders. Above them, a commission, a governing body made up of the bosses themselves, meeting periodically to resolve disputes, approve major decisions, and prevent the kind of catastrophic warfare that had just killed hundreds of men and nearly destroyed everything they had built. The families take shape. The Luciano family, which will later bear the name Genovese, the Mangano family, which will become the Gambino, the Profaci family, which will become the Colombo, the Gagliano family, which will become the Lucchese, and the Bonanno family, led by Joe Bonanno, the youngest boss in the room at just 26 years old. New York City is divided with surgical precision. Brooklyn goes to Mangano and Profaci, split between them. The Bronx falls to Gagliano. Manhattan, the jewel, goes primarily to Luciano. Queens and Staten Island are carved up accordingly. Each family controls its neighborhoods, its docks, its construction sites, its gambling operations, its loan sharks, its unions. The lines are not written on paper, they are understood. And understanding is enforced with consequences no one wants to experience firsthand. The commission itself is a masterpiece of criminal governance. It doesn't micromanage, it arbitrates. When a dispute arises between families, over territory, over a contract, over a slight, the bosses meet and render judgment. No single boss can order the killing of another made man without commission approval. This rule alone prevents the chaos that destroyed the previous generation. It gives the organization something no criminal empire had possessed before: institutional stability. The families recruit through a formal process. A man cannot simply join. He must be Italian, preferably Sicilian. He must be vouched for by existing members. He must have proven his reliability, which typically means he has already committed serious crimes on behalf of the organization. The initiation ritual involves a pricked finger, burning paper, an oath sworn on the flame. From that moment, the man is a made member, untouchable by outside criminals, protected by the full weight of his family, and bound, theoretically, for life. Omerta, the code of silence, is not just a tradition, it is the operating system. Members who speak to law enforcement don't receive warnings, they receive funerals. Through the 1930s and 40s, the 5 families expand into every profitable corner of. They control the waterfront through the International Longshoremen's Association, skimming millions from cargo moving through the largest port on the eastern seaboard. They infiltrate construction, garbage collection, the garment district, the Fulton Fish Market. They run numbers operations in Harlem, bookmaking across all 5 boroughs, loan sharking in every neighborhood that needs cash and can't get a bank loan. At their peak, the families collectively generate hundreds of millions of dollars per year, in an era when a working-class family earns perhaps $2,000 annually. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, officially denies that organized crime exists as a national entity. For years, this denial is the greatest gift the Commission ever receives. That ends in 1957. A state trooper in rural Appalachian, New York, notices an unusual number of expensive cars parked outside a local estate. He calls for backup. When police move in, over 60 well-dressed men scatter into the surrounding woods. Some are caught. All are identified. The guest list reads like a who's who of American organized crime. The meeting at Appalachian forces the government to admit, finally, that the Commission is real, that the families are real, and that they have been operating in broad daylight for over 2 decades. The walls begin to close. federal investigations intensify. The Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, passed in 1970, gives prosecutors a weapon specifically designed to dismantle criminal enterprises from the top down. By the 1980s, the bosses of all 5 families are simultaneously under federal indictment. In 1986, the so-called Mafia Commission trial convicts the heads of the Genovese, Gambino, Lucchese, and Colombo families on racketeering charges. Sentences range from 40 years to 100. The men who sat at the top of the most powerful criminal structure in American history walk into federal prison and don't walk out. The 5 families survive, technically. They exist today, diminished, fragmented, watched on every corner by federal agents who now know exactly what they're looking at. The old codes have frayed. Cooperation agreements with prosecutors, deals that would have meant instant death in 1931, have become almost routine. But here is what endures. The structure that Luciano and his associates designed in the ruins of a gang war almost 100 years ago became the template. Every major criminal organization that followed, the cartels, the syndicates, the networks, borrowed something from it. The idea that crime could be governed, that violence could be rationed, that profit could be maximized through structure rather than chaos. That idea came from 5 men sitting down in a room in New York and agreeing to draw some lines. Maranzano wanted to be Caesar. Luciano built Rome. Maranzano wanted to be Caesar. Luciano built Rome.